Hello, everybody, and welcome. We're going to give it just a second while we get people on. Thanks for joining us tonight. While you're getting settled in, if you get a chance, just type the city where you're from and maybe the age of your loved one with autism or another developmental disability. Kind of gives Brian an idea of the age group that he's speaking to. So thank you, Daisy. Yeah, welcome. And we'll give it just a few more seconds. Temecula, 9 years. So I call these the baby. Oh, Austin, Texas, 12-year-olds. Welcome, Texas. That's, I think, 2 hours ahead of us, right? Yes. Oh, well, thank you for staying up for this. We appreciate it.
No pressure.
Right.
No pressure.
No pressure. No pressure. Brian's used to it. So welcome. So while I see it starting to slow down, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I think most people know that if you need an interpreter, you can click on the button that looks like the world and click either English or Spanish. We ask that if you are an English speaker, go ahead and click on the English button. And that way, if any of our Spanish speakers have a question, you'll be able to hear what that question is. So it just makes it really nice and easy. So thank you for doing that. My name is Beth Burt. I am the Executive Director of the Autism Society in Lynn Empire, and I am a proud parent of a young man who's going to be 30 in just a couple of months. I know, I can't believe how fast time flies. And I'm proud to be here tonight. This is a great presentation and an important presentation. And I want to introduce Donna Roth from the Roth Make Waves Family Foundation, because without their generous funding, we wouldn't have been able to provide the training Brian will talk a little bit about in Orange County to almost 70 officers. I believe it was 14 different agencies over in Orange County. So Donna, thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I would love for you to just tell people a little bit about why this project was important to you.
So, I mean, we're thrilled to be a part of this. And, you know, we have a foundation, Make Waves Foundation, and we really a focused mission is on kids over 22 when they lose services, etc. And my son does live in the area, to be transparent. And we just thought it's just another thing that every time you go into a new community, you have to think about everything all over again, because he hasn't always been here. So, you know, so we said, you know, it would be great. And, you know, we're so thankful you took this on, and we're so glad to be a part of it, because it's just so important for these young adults. So thank you.
Thank you. And you bring up a good point, Donna, that sometimes, especially as moms and as dads and family members, you know, when they're living at home and we've gotten used to the way everything is, and then they move out on their own, which is supposed to be the next logical step. And now you have to start all over, building all those support systems. And thank you for allowing us to be part of that. It is really important. And thank you for being proactive enough to make a difference in not only your son's life, but a lot of families' lives. So we appreciate you.
Thank you, and you're welcome.
All right, so now I'm going to introduce Brian. And I know Brian's going to talk a little bit about who he is. I have had the pleasure of knowing and working with Brian, I'll just say a long time. I'm not going to say how many years. So Brian is an autism dad. He's also a retired police officer, and I have sat through, I don't know, 20 presentations maybe he's given over the years, and I learn something every single time. He comes with the lens of law enforcement, which we don't always have, and he's been that great translator to law enforcement to talk about our community with passion. And you know, they were using that word cultural sensitivity and helping officers understand a little bit about what our life is like and not to judge us as parents and to understand us when we're at our most vulnerable. So Brian, thank you for all you do. We're proud to be a partner with you on this wonderful project. And I'm just going to remind people, if you have questions, either throw them in the chat or the Q&A, and I'm going to go dark and let Brian talk, but I'll be looking at the Q&A and we'll definitely save some time at the end. Or if there's something that's really pertinent, I'll jump in and interrupt Brian, and hopefully he won't be too mad at me.
Nah, you're good. Thank you,
right.
Beth. And I want to also thank Ms. Roth, and your son actually came out, and I had the privilege of meeting him. And I will tell you, I was inspired. My son, we call him Little Brian, although he's bigger than I am, is 20. He's considered severe. He's nonverbal, but to see your son interact with your daughter, and the fact that your son lives on his own and he's got that independence. My daughter is 13, my son is 20. I want my kids to do what your family did. So I was really impressed with that. And he was a very funny young man who I enjoyed speaking with.
That's great.
So I appreciate it. So just so you guys know, and I know we don't just have Orange County. I know I looked at the chat and we had some people in the Inland Empire, which is where Beth and I are actually from. We have people from Texas. We have people from all over the place. And I'm glad you're here. I think the overwhelming thing for me is and I say this all the time, when we do these family nights, I could see 40 people. That's great for a family night. Normally I've done them with as few as 6 or 7, and I've done them with as many as 100. So to see 40, that's great. And I think the way I look at it and the way Beth looks at it, and I think with the Make Waves Foundation, is if one of you walks away from here with something that will further protect your loved one, then it was all worth it. And that's kind of the way I look at it. A little bit about me, and then I'm going to share my PowerPoint, and we'll go through the presentation. It'll probably take me about an hour. If you have questions, Beth and I have known each other for a long time. Like she said, Beth has no problem interrupting me, or you guys, if you want to unmute yourself, and if you have the ability to. I don't know if Beth gave it to you or not. If you have to go through, Beth, just ask the question, say, can you ask Brian this? And we'll get through it. The other thing at the end is I always make myself available through email, text messages, and I give out my phone number to families all over the country. So if I can help you with something, then by all means, reach out. I'll be honest, I don't always answer the phone, and I don't always answer emails the day they're sent, but I will do my best to try to assist you guys any way that I can. So a little bit about me and my story. Let me go in and share my screen with you. And get into my story with you. Hopefully what you guys are seeing is a picture of my family, and this one's about 7 years old. We don't take a lot of family pictures, but that's my family as of about 6 years ago. So my wife, Linda, my older son, Vinny, who's 22 today, my daughter, Isabella, who is actually just within the last 2 months was diagnosed on the spectrum with high functioning autism, and little Brian, who's standing behind me. My journey is probably not unlike a lot of yours. And it's one that when I do teach law enforcement, I make sure that they know my story. And my story, I didn't know what autism was 18 years ago when Brian was diagnosed. I was a cop, and sadly at that time I was a cop for about 5 years, and I should have known, but it wasn't something that we in law enforcement were taught. In fact, training has come a long way from where it was when I went through the police academy 23 years ago, and I went through the academy. Police officers got 2 hours of training total on anybody with what they called then people with disabilities. And that was mental illness, developmental disabilities, people with physical special needs. 2 hours was all that cops had before they hit the street. Now, some agencies gave a little bit more, some didn't, but 2 hours. We were expected, when I became a cop 20 years ago, we were expected, you were going to learn those lessons on the street. And you were going to learn those lessons as you went through those calls. One of the good things that's changed with law enforcement is the fact that we now know in law enforcement that that's not good enough. We need to teach cops in the academy. We need to teach cops before they hit the street, and we need to continue to train cops. Is it where it should be? No, it's not. I'll be honest. But there has been progress made. But when I started with Brian, I didn't even know what autism was. And I'm not going to go through my whole story with you guys, but I will tell you, I was the parent that was in denial. I was the parent that didn't believe there was anything wrong with my son. My wife and I argued every time anything came up because I refused to believe that he couldn't do anything and that he was going to have any type of difficulty. It was my wife that was wrong and the doctors that were wrong. They were the ones that were broken, not my son. Luckily, after several years in dealing with being honest with you, clinical depression, almost losing my career a couple of times, I was able to kind of rectify myself, and I found myself on this path of not only advocating for my son and now my daughter, but advocating for everybody with autism. And then it turned into everybody with mental illness and developmental disabilities. And then it just kind of turned into everybody. But that was my path, and that wasn't decided by me. And I don't sit on here and get on a pedestal and preach to anybody. It's not my place, but I do believe there was a purpose. And I will tell you that as of today, the rough estimate for me is about 15 to 20,000 police officers and law enforcement professionals, public safety professionals I have trained throughout the country, which is a huge number. I've also written books. I'm a subject matter expert for the state. I'm not going to go through all that with you guys. Just, I'm known as Autism Cop. I do it throughout the country. I teach hostage negotiation. I work with the FBI on occasion. I train all over the country. I'm on staff with several different agencies. I do a lot of reviews, policy reviews, and things like that. I look at it as a tremendous honor to be able to represent families like mine to my profession that I love. And to me, it is it's an honor, it's a blessing, and it's something I don't take very lightly. There are other people that do what I do, that train law enforcement. And you know, I'm sure they're great at what they do. My approach to training cops is I hit them with reality. I hit them with truth, and it's coming for them from a peer and from somebody that is kind of respected. I was fortunate enough throughout my career to meet a lot of people, to be involved in some pretty big cases and big things. So I have a story to tell, and most cops like listening to it. They are very receptive. So, you know, through training, when we did our training in Orange County, we vested, I think it was close to 80 officers, tons of different agencies, federal agencies, police departments, fire departments, sheriff's departments, parole, CHP, across the board. And it was a great turnout, and it planted a lot of seeds that we're still now watering. As far as in Orange County, we're still watering some of those seeds from agencies that said, hey, this is really good, we need to spread it on. I have a website, but I'm not one that's big on publicizing what I do. I usually go off of referral, and that keeps me plenty busy. Doing my Autism Cop stuff is kind of my side hustle. I've always had a day job. I was a cop. I medically retired from being a cop. I ran security for the county of San Bernardino, for those of you guys that are in San Bernardino. And then I was the security director at Legoland, California. I did that for 4 years. I developed their, not only their disability program, which they call their special needs program, and their internal training on autism and other things. I also developed their entire security department. I left that job and became the chief of police for the Saboba Indian Reservation. I did that for a couple of years. And right now, I'm in a job that I'm very passionate about and I love, and that is I am the supervising court investigator for San Bernardino County. And what I have is a team of 15 investigators that do conservatorships and guardianships. So I will tell you guys, if you have questions about conservatorships or any of that stuff, reach out to me and let me know. Like Ms. Ross said, and their foundation is focusing on 22 and older, which I'll be honest, there's not a lot of resources there. There's not a lot of families that know what conservatorship is. One of the things Beth and I are working on, and Beth more than me by far, but is what is the roadmap for services for our loved ones when they age out of that system of the school district, and what is that look like? What does it look like if they're in crisis? Where do they go? What do they do? And I wish I could sit in here and tell you, whether you're in Orange County or Texas, that somebody has all the answers, but I've gone throughout this entire country teaching, and I will tell you, nobody has all the answers, and nobody has all the services yet, and nobody has everything right yet. So it is a tremendous need. My son is 20. He's phasing out of those services, so it's a worry of me. We know people with developmental disabilities, the unemployment rate is exceptionally high, and it's hard for them to get jobs, and where do they live? And a lot of you, just like me, my biggest fear is what happens to my child and my children with special needs after I die. What's going to happen? Who's going to take care of them? How do I know they're not going to become victims in society? How do I know they're going to be protected and be able to be productive and provide for themselves? So that's kind of my journey, for lack of a better term, of where I'm at. So, and I don't have a script. I'm talking to you guys straight from the heart, just sitting up here and talking. But that is my family in front of you. Brian, I will tell you and talk a little bit about Brian. Brian restored my faith in humanity, to put it bluntly. I am always the parent, and a lot of you in the room, you probably have one or the other. I'm blessed because, me and my wife are still married 22 years later. But Brian, he is a comedian. He is considered nonverbal. He's considered severely autistic, but he knows what's going on. I'm always the one that tries to put limits on him and, hey, don't push him too hard, honey. I don't think he can do that. I don't think we should have him do that. And he, like I said, he's restored my humanity, my sense of humanity and faith in the world. We've had our good times and our bad times. Brian also has epilepsy. He also has sensory processing disorders, bipolar disorder, a lot of other things. But he's one of the joys of my life. All of my kids are, but he's definitely there. My daughter, Isabella, who I told you was just recently diagnosed, she's on the higher side of the spectrum, or on the less severe side of the spectrum, if you want to go that route. Extremely smart, straight A student, 8th grade ASB president of the yearbook, president of the TV media club, head cheerleader. Beth will tell you, we go out to stuff with Beth all the time, and she loves talking to Izzy, because Izzy, she's just a sweet kid. You ask Izzy, what are you going to do with your life? She'll tell you she's going to become an attorney. And then she's going to be an attorney for people with special needs. She's going to open up a chain of coffee shops throughout America that's going to employ people with autism and developmental disabilities. And she's going to make 90% of her workforce be people that could not get otherwise employed. How do you not love that about my daughter? So those are my kids. And Vinny, he's just as important. He actually cost me more money than my other 2 kids combined. So what are we going to talk about over the next 45 minutes or so? It's about bridging the gap with first responders. So this class is part of a grant that was funded by Ms. Roth and her foundation to bring this program to Orange County, which includes law enforcement training and then training for families. Now, you don't have to be in Orange County to be part of this training. That's something they were nice enough to open up to everybody. But this is that second part of the family training. So we're going to talk about, I talked to the cops about, hey, this is how you get in tune with families. This is what families go through. This is what you can do for families. Now I'm going to talk to you guys about what you can do for the cops and how to help first responders, not just cops, but firefighters also. We're going to talk about safety risks in your home, safety risks in your community, and then even safety risks in your school. That's where we're going to get to. Where are we at now? And this is a picture. I don't know if you guys remember this incident, have ever even heard about this incident, but it occurred in Florida. And what it is the young man that's sitting there and sitting up in Indian style, he has in his hands a metal train. His favorite thing, and we all know when I say that what we're talking about, his favorite thing is trains. He lives in a care facility in this neighborhood where this incident took place. He is walking around that neighborhood with the gentleman with the yellow shirt on there, who is one of his caregivers in the facility. One of the neighbors sees two, and he is the young man sitting there at the time. I want to say he was 19 years old. He is diagnosed severely autistic. He's nonverbal, a big kid, 6 foot, 250, 260 pounds. They are just going for a neighborhood walk and he's holding his metal train. What one of the members of the community calls into law enforcement is there's 2 African-American people walking around my neighborhood and one of them has a metal gun. So law enforcement responds to the call of a potential armed person walking through a neighborhood. When they contact these 2 in this little cul-de-sac area, they pull their guns, cops, which I get and I support. They have to defend themselves. They have families to go home to. And with the call they're on, I get it. But the young man with autism, doesn't comply with any of their commands, which they don't understand why. The other gentleman, his caregiver, starts yelling to the police officers that he's autistic, he's nonverbal, he has a train, they're going for a walk, they live down the street. And the police officers continually tell the caretaker to not talk. And they don't do it that politely. So he just can't talk. They end up frozen in that position for about an hour. And at the conclusion of the incident, the caretaker is actually shot in the leg, which turned out to be an incidental shooting, and the officer that did it was terminated. But why I bring it up to you is this. There were 7 officers that responded to that call, all from this small city in Florida. None of them knew there was a care facility within a block of where they were. None of them knew who this young man was. None of them knew that place that cared for 8 people with developmental disabilities was even in their jurisdiction. And that's a fault of them, because I would think they would want to know. They had been there on calls before, but that information was never shared. So that is a fault of law enforcement. I don't blame the facility, but what I'm going to teach you today and what I'm going to share with you today and encourage you to do today is some homework. And one of those things is to reach out to your law enforcement agency so they know your house. They know your address. So if your loved one does walk out, they know there's a history at that address. And they know it's within that area. I'm going to give you more than that. But that is a situation that we talk about in my law enforcement classes as well. So as we get into this, like I said, I'm trying to bridge that gap between families and law enforcement, like I do with law enforcement and families. And I'm going to tell you that the very first thing a first responder attempts to gain when he or she first responds to any location or call for service, there's one thing that they have to try to establish. And I will be honest, when you're in training to be a cop, you are not going to be a cop for very long if you cannot establish this. And it's this: control. Now, I will speak for myself and not for any of you. There are days in my home where I can't get this. We're with my own son that I know and I've spent 20 years with, and I've gone through therapy with, and ABA therapy, and I've researched, and I'm a nationally recognized expert on autism. I'm the guy that teaches the cops, and I'm the guy that represents families. And I'm going to be honest with you and tell you, there are times I can't get control. I can't do it in my own home. Okay. But I'm telling you, if a cop shows up at your door, if you're out with your loved one and the cops are called because your loved one's having a meltdown or an issue, the first thing they're going to do is to try to establish control. And if we can't get control, and we love our loved ones, we've raised our loved ones, we've been with them every day, and we can't do it, is it fair to expect a police officer to do it? And the answer to that is no, it's not fair. Now, I'm not telling you don't call the police, because if you need the police, you call the police, and the police will show up, and they need to show up. But what they're going to try to establish when they show up is control. And if the situation in your home or that you're at, there is no control, their job, their bloodline, the way they do their job every day is to establish control. Okay. I learned very early when Brian was 3 and 4 years old that yelling at my son was not going to get him to do what I wanted to do. And it drove me crazy. I'm a big guy. I've been a cop for a long time. And when I tell people on the street to do something, they do it. To go home and have a 4-year-old look at me and smile when I tell him to do something drove me crazy. It drove me crazy that I couldn't control my son. And I know that sounds very rigid and military, but he just wouldn't follow what I wanted him to do. He did what he wanted to do. And it took me a long time to learn I had to put my hands in my pockets, and I had to talk to him in this tone. So Brian was focusing on what I said, not how I said it. And he had to focus. And those are the things I try to teach cops. But the reason I'm teaching you this is because I want you to know when they get there, why we tell people, hey, hold on a second, I need to deal with him. And I get it. And if I'm if a police officer showed up at my house right now and said, I need to talk to your son, I'm going to say, no way in hell you're going to talk to my kid. Sorry, you're not. You don't know my kid. You're not going to talk to my kid. Talk to me if you need to talk about my kid. But I understand what cops do. I do. And I want you to understand that's the case. Here's another thing that's true. In over half of the calls that law enforcement responds to the home of somebody with autism, the home isn't who made the call to law enforcement asking for help. So what I mean by that is it's your neighbors, it's a passerby. If you're at the store and your kid's having a meltdown, it's somebody else in the store. So they call the police and they report what they think they see. And then now law enforcement is involved, and you didn't invite them in. You don't need them there. You know they can't help, but they can't leave until they know everything's okay. Well, if we don't have control, they can't leave until they know we do. So that's why I talk about talking to your neighbors that you know and let them know, hey, you know, and especially if they're good people, talk to them and say, hey, look, if you ever hear anything at night, please call me before you call the police and ask me if things are okay. Because what might be deemed a crisis to somebody else, to a lot of us, is just going to the store. I mean, when Brian was little, Brian would have meltdowns in stores, and I would run him out of the store with my hand over his mouth, him biting my fingers and screaming, and people thinking I kidnapped my own kid. But to me, it was just Brian was mad that we were at the store. But to everybody else, it looked like I was kidnapping my own kid. So understand the need for control and understand where some of those come from. Your part in this, though, as family members, is to do this, and that is to provide the disclosure. And I told you I'm going to give you homework. And the first two things I'm going to ask you to do is, whether you're in Texas, you're in Rialto, or you're in Orange County, doesn't matter where you are. What I want you to do is tonight, tomorrow morning, whenever you get a chance, look up your local police department. If it's a sheriff's department that does it, wherever that local station is that responds to your house, your local police department. And I want you to go to that police department. I want you to walk into the lobby with your loved one with autism or developmental disabilities. And I want you to say, can I please talk to a sergeant? And the people there are going to look at you and say, why? And you're going to say, I just need to talk to a supervisor, please. And they're going to tell you, have a seat. You're going to see them get on the phone and be all hush hush. There's going to be cameras that are going to turn to you because everybody's going to want to know why you're there. But when somebody does come out and talk to you, this is what you say. You say, hi, my name is so-and-so. I live at this address in your city. This is my son, my daughter. He or she has been diagnosed with autism, developmental disabilities, whatever it is. I want you as a police department to know my address and know my son so you can put him in whatever system you have. So if you ever show up at my house, you know they live there before you even get there. And they will probably look at you and say, okay, we can do that. For a lot of law enforcement agencies, they have a Take Me Home program, which Orange County, if you're in Orange County, they started one recently that you can go on their website and get information on. They have a Take Me Home program. I started a Take Me Home program in San Diego. There's one in San Bernardino County. There's one in Riverside County. There is one in San Diego, like I said, but you want to enroll them in that program. But if you look on the website and they don't have one, I still want you to walk into the local station and tell them that. If you live in a city that has its own police department, I want you to walk in and introduce them. Most cops, you're going to see supervisors and sergeants are going to be very friendly to our loved ones. It's not that they don't want to talk to our loved ones. It's they don't want to offend anybody and they don't know what to say. So it's very hard to get a cop to admit that he doesn't know something. Trust me, I am one, and I'm going to tell you, you can't get me to admit I don't know something. Okay. I've actually gotten better at it over the years, but they're not going to tell you, I don't know what that means. I'm sorry. I don't know anything about that. They're not. They're going to go, okay. Yeah, I understand. I got you. Even if they don't. But I want you to walk into the police department and make that disclosure. Then check and see if they have a program and make that disclosure. And then I want you to go to the local fire station that's as close to your house as you can find on Google. And I want you to go. Now, fire guys are a lot better at this than cops. The fire guys are going to invite you in. They're going to show you where they sleep. They're going to show you the fact that they never work. All they do is cook. And there's a big thing between cops and firefighters. So if you're a firefighter, I apologize. But firefighters are very much better at it. But why I want you to go to firefighters is if you have a medical emergency or if there's a fire at your home, I want them to know that you have a loved one with special needs in your home. And I want them to know what their situation is. And I want them to know your loved one before they have to meet them at a call. So that way this disclosure is already done. Now I'm going to tell you something probably more than once tonight is this. If you're reacting to a situation, you are not preparing for it. All of us are great advocates for our loved ones. That's what we do. We're good at it. We're great at making other people mad. We're great at telling the school district to pound sand. You're going to give me what I want. We are great advocates. Part of being a great advocate is doing what I'm telling you to do right now. That's part of being that good parent and that good advocate. So you have to do the disclosure because if you're reacting, it's too late to prepare for it. Now it's just a reaction. Okay, so that's your first piece of homework, your police department and your fire department. How can you help? Again, contact first responders prior, enroll them in those programs like we talked about. Provide the address, name, and a picture of them if you have it. Bring it with you down to the station. Advise them if they have sensory issues. This is my son, he has autism, and if you touch him, he's probably going to punch you in the face. They want to know that. They need to know that. And then information sheets. You can find information sheets all over the place on the internet if you do special needs registry information sheet and just start filling out the information. All of the programs that I've told you about in Texas, I'm sorry, I don't know. Although I was actually teaching in Colorado online today, not Texas. But if you enroll in those programs, to enroll them, you have to fill out information sheets. And what an information sheet is it talks about their diagnosis, their medications, who are the family members, what is their thing that they like that could be a comfort item, what are things they don't like, are there any diet restrictions? All of those things are on those forms. And those are what we call information sheets. What do you do with those sheets? Now, when you enroll them in the program, and you guys are going to find that information or you look up information sheets, you're going to print out a couple copies of it after you fill it out or make copies of what you fill out. And this is where I would suggest that you put them. One is I would put it on the refrigerator of your house. And here's why. Firefighters and cops, when there's a fire or a major disaster, when we want to know who lives in the house, one of the things we do is we go to your refrigerator. Because on most people's refrigerators are pictures of their kids. And we'll look at the pictures and go, how many bedrooms we have in the house? 5. All right, I got a picture of mom and dad here and 4 kids. So now we know roughly where we're going. So on that refrigerator, you want to put on a magnet that information sheet. The other place you want to put it is in your glove box. Have you ever thought of if you get in a car accident or, and it may not be, it's not your fault, you get in a car accident, but you have your loved one behind you who may be nonverbal and now you're unconscious. How are the first responders going to know what to deal with? I will tell you the glove box in cars for cops it's kind of like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like Indiana Jones finding that secret treasure. We love a glove box. We love to search your glove box. We just do. Sometimes there's bad stuff in glove boxes, but also if we want to find out who the registered owner of a car is, where do we go? Where do you put your registration and your insurance information? In your glove box. So add that to that. Again, your neighbors. I just talked about that. If you know your neighbors, even know them casually, walk over to them one time and say, hey, in this envelope is the information on my son or my daughter. If you ever see the fire department roll up and can you run out, please, and give them this. And again, don't go up to strangers and give them all that info, but if it's people that you know, keep it in a safe with your important papers. And your important papers in a safe should be your conservatorship if you have one. Should be the most recent IEP if you have one. Should be those IHS forms and all of those things and the information sheets. And then I always tell people, provide one to the school. Brian no longer goes to public school. He's in a program. He stopped right now going to it. He may re-enroll. He gets to go till he's 22. But I always kind of chuckled at the fact that when Brian was in grade school, that the special ed teacher, we would show up the first day of school, she would take in 8 kids with autism in an autism only class and wouldn't know anything about them. And I'm supposed to turn around and go home and be comfortable with my son being in a room with a bunch of people he don't know, that don't know anything about him on the first day of school. I'm supposed to be okay with that. And I'll be honest with you, I never was. I always told the district I want to meet his teacher 2 days before school starts. And when I did, and I was able to, because I told the district that's what I wanted, I would go meet with the teacher and I would say, I want to teach you a little bit about Brian. This is how you calm him down. This is what upsets him. Here is an information sheet with everything you're going to need for him. And I would debrief a teacher 2 days before school started because I didn't like showing up and not knowing who he was going to be with and then not knowing him. So at school, that was another way I did that. How can you help with conservatorships? Conservatorships, and I said that's what I do now professionally. When our loved ones turn 18, you are going to have problems if you don't have a conservatorship. You're going to have problems with IEPs. You're going to have problems with medical appointments. They may not be as severe if you have good relationships with those people that are involved with healthcare. Like if you have the same doctor, they may not notice or ask you for it. But you need to start thinking about conservatorships about 1 year in advance, if not before. You might need an attorney. I'm going to tell you, I am the autism cop. I'm the guy that knows everything. And this was before Brian got his when he was 17, was before I worked in conservatorships like I do now. But I said to myself, these are court documents. I write search warrants. I've written police reports. I've testified in trials. There's no way I'm not going to be able to do this paperwork. And I ended up having to call an attorney. And I'm just being honest with you. Most courts offer free legal aid, and I probably could have went that route. But you need to have an attorney because it is an important document and an important legal statute that you need to understand. And there's lots of variations to it. Society is getting more serious about the needs for conservatorships, for school, medical, and again, for a limited conservatorship in California, there's 7 different types. And that's another class on another time. Financially, how can you help? And this is just me as a dad giving you guys some family tips of things that we've used. And they do apply into the conservatorship part. ABLE accounts is something that was formed a couple of years back that will allow you to save up to $100,000 in money for the care and spending of a person with special needs that is, there's tax breaks on it and it doesn't count against their income. And you can have up to $100,000 in it. I have an ABLE account for my son. Trust funds and wills, I always tell people contact an attorney. They're great. And if you're in a position to have one, they're great, but they are very tricky with the income and how it affects the services. If you get IHSS, if they get Social Security, all those things are impacted. So again, go to an attorney if you can, try to get some free legal aid. You can do a lot of that research on your own online. But remember that during the incident, it's too late to prepare. I've already kind of hit on that. So what types of crimes, when we're talking about law enforcement, what types of crimes are more frequently connected with autism? And these are through my experience, and again, me doing this across the country, harassment is a big one. And it's not, and I'll be honest, not only are people with autism, they can be the harasser, but they're also often the bullied and the harassed. And that happens quite a bit. So we see a lot of harassment cases, theft cases. And the theft cases may be that the person with autism committed a theft and didn't understand the concept of theft. They weren't able to form the criminal, they weren't, they don't have the knowledge of committing the crime. So it may not have been that, but theft is one of those that people do. We find a high percentage with people with autism. Sexual offenses is growing exponentially. And it's everything from people with autism being victims. And I deal a lot with those cases and doing interviews where they're victims of sexual assault, sexual battery, rape, all of those things. And then in some cases, they're also arrested for sexual offenses that maybe they don't understand what they're doing. But it is a huge issue because the truth is our loved ones do grow up. They do get mature. They do have sexual appetites and sexual urges and all of those things. And it's not, I'm not going to sit here and go through all of that with all of you, but I am going to tell you it's a concern of every parent I've ever met with somebody with autism. So I'm going to tell you that it is an issue in the law enforcement world, and it is. And it's something that we need to be able to talk about and explore. And then child endangerment, a lot of times comes down to the parents. I'll be honest, full disclosure, I've had CPS called on me before. The funny thing for me was, or the ironic thing, when the CPS officer showed up at my house, I knocked on the door. I knew they were coming because they had interviewed my son at school. I opened the door and the CPS officer that showed up said to me, "Hi, Mr. Herritt. My name is," and she introduced herself. She said, "I took your class a couple of years ago. I'm sorry I'm here. I know you're not abusing little Brian, but I have to do what I have to do to X this report out." I said, "Come on in and do what you got to do." So I've had them called on me. So I know it happens. I know it's unfair sometimes when it happens. I know there are people that look at, and law enforcement looks at sometimes what our houses look like, what our homes look like, what our lives are like, and they judge. And that's one of the reasons when I train, I tell them my story. Because I tell them, if you were in my house right now, I have 3 holes in my walls I haven't patched. My son's room has plastic over the windows because he punches the windows to break them. My son's room has nothing in it but a bed. And if you go in my daughter's room, she's got thousands of dollars worth of stuff. That for a cop may mean that I'm neglecting my son. The truth is I'm protecting my son by not putting a TV in his room or anything that he can hurt himself with. So that's what we try to teach. But these are the most common types of calls that we see. Along that line of sex and intimacy, and I told you about sexual crimes, my wife asked me to throw this out for parents because she used it and it works. And this is an actual program called Circles, Intimacy, and Relationships by a lady named Marklyn Champagne. I don't get anything from her. I'm only sharing it with you because it worked for us. And what we did is in the circle program is we told little Brian, when it's you in the middle, you can be naked, you can go to the bathroom, you can take a shower, but it can only be you. When it gets to intimate, it can only be me, mommy, daddy, you, or your doctor. Those are the only people that can see you with no clothes on. And it's okay for them to see you with no clothes on. With your friends, you have to have your clothes on, and it's okay to shake hands and hug your friends. With acquaintances, it's not okay to hug, but it's appropriate to shake your hands. And then with people you just met, you can maybe shake hands, but then you wave. And it's kind of putting those barriers on what's acceptable behavior and what's not. So I don't get anything from it. I'm not necessarily endorsing it other than to say that it worked for us and we did a modification to it. But that's what it is. And if you need it, Beth can get you the info if you guys are interested later through me, and she can push it out to you. So what do you do if your loved one is arrested? What do you do if you do get that call? Now, I will tell you right now in the Inland Empire, I get that call from Beth, who gets that call from families probably 3 or 4 times a month. And Beth will call me now and she'll say, Brian, we have another one. And I know what that means. And I say, okay, where was it at? What's the story and what happens? And here's what I can't do. And Beth knows this. I can't pick up the phone and call the agency and said, hey, you arrested a kid with autism. You were wrong. Let that kid go. And here's why. One, people with autism, some can commit crimes. They can form criminal intent and they know right from wrong and can commit crimes. I'm not saying all of them can. I'm saying some of them can. So I don't know the whole story usually, but what I do is I listen to Beth. Beth talks to the family. I don't talk to the family. Usually I use Beth in between, but we look at, okay, what was the situation? What happened? And then it's, for me, it's, even if what this kid did was, or adult was wrong, is how can I better protect them if they have an autism diagnosis? What can I tell Beth to tell the family to ask for? Even if what they did, they knew was wrong and they need to go to jail, they still are a public safety risk while they're in jail. So I want to make sure that they're protected. So the first thing is always call an attorney. Okay. You notify whoever calls you and says, hey, we have your son in jail, or we're taking your son to jail. You say, okay, what is your name? And you write down the name of the person that arrested him. Okay. And you're going to tell them, I want you to know he has autism. He takes medication. He also has epilepsy. These are his diagnoses. Even if they don't listen to you, you tell them, because you're going to take detailed notes about what you did say. You're going to be able to provide, hey, if you're going to take them to jail, can I give you medications? They're going to tell you, no, you need to contact the jail. And that's true. Now, the jail can get any medication that they need. So don't think that if they're there for 2 days and they need their medication, if they know about it, they can get that medication. They don't need to get it from you. They can get it, but you want to offer to be able to provide their medications. And then you want to take detailed notes on everything and everything you know and everybody you talk to. You want to take very detailed notes. That's what to do if they're arrested. Now, like I said, you guys have my number. You want to call me, that's fine. I don't call law enforcement agencies after somebody's been arrested. There are certain agencies, I know chiefs and I know people in that I can kind of look into a little bit, but it's best for me to stay out of it. I just advise the families better ways to keep them safe if they are arrested. So now we get into the anti-wandering and elopement, okay? If you have a loved one with autism or special needs that doesn't understand the concept of danger, they do not run away from your home. They elope from their situation. Elopement means not knowingly putting yourself in a situation where you're in danger because you don't understand the consequences of your actions. Most people think of the term elopement as what two people do when they just met and they go to Vegas and get married. We say they eloped. Well, it's the same thing. It's making a decision that you don't understand, you don't have all the information on, and you may be putting yourself in danger. That's what our loved ones do when they get out of our home. And I will tell you, if it's happened to you, or if it does happen to you, you're not a bad parent. Our kids are great at escaping. I have learned that. They are great. So there's a big part of this of things to do to prevent that if that's a worry of yours or what happens. One is, again, talk to your neighbors. My neighbors know that if they ever see Brian without my wife or my kids or me, that something is horribly wrong. He should never be in my neighborhood alone. And I tell them, I've talked to numerous of my neighbors and said, if you ever see him on a loan, please call me or Linda and let us know he's out. If we don't answer the phone, I want you to do me a favor. Please call the police. And please, and most of my neighbors I tell this to, Brian knows. He doesn't know them well enough to like hang out with them, but he's given them high fives and he said hello to them. And I say to them, to my neighbors, if he's ever alone and you call the police, please walk up to Brian and stop him from going further away from my home. I don't necessarily want him to tackle him. I'm not asking them to bring him in their house. I just want them to distract him until either me or Linda or their siblings or law enforcement can get to him. Secure your windows and your doors. I'm a big advocate of multiple locks and door alarms and lock alarms and window alarms. Home alarm systems I'm huge on. I have a camera system on my phone that I can look at my home every night. Brian also has epilepsy, so we have a special camera in his room that will notify us if there's a loud sound or too much motion, and it goes off and it makes an alarm sound and we hear it. We also have a home alarm system. So if Brian tries to leave at 2 a.m, and he doesn't do that, but if he did, I would know. Video and CCTV, you don't always have to go by the most expensive system. I think the camera system me and Linda have, and I'll even tell you, it's on my phone. The camera system we have, we don't pay a ton of money for. I think it's $11 a month for storage. It's called Ye Home System. The cameras are $30. They're wireless, rechargeable. You put them wherever you want, and it's $11 a month, and you can get recordings and get camera systems in real time. And that's what I use. Doesn't mean that's what you have to use. I'm just saying you don't have to buy a $500 home camera system and then pay $100 a month for monitoring. The last part of this is keep records of what you do and for proof if you need it. And what I mean by that is, if you have a 3-year-old, and I don't know if any of you do, but he elopes, he gets out of your house at 2 a.m. and law enforcement finds them on the street. And you don't know because you're asleep. And they have them for a couple hours and then they reunite you with them. They are going to automatically notify family services because they have to. It's a requirement. It's a law. And when family service comes out and says, we'd like to know how your son got out, what I want you or daughter got out, I want you to be able to say, here is a folder with all of the things we've done to keep him safe. Here is a receipt for the window tint. Here's a receipt for my camera system. Here's a receipt for the locks I bought for the doors. Here's a receipt for the gates that I bought to put around the house. These are all the things that I've done and modifications I've made to try to keep him safe. You want to overdo the fact that you're a good parent. And I hate to tell you that you may need to prove it, but you may need to prove it. And I don't want to see your kid become part of the system. When you do call the police, if they elope or they are out of your care and you can't find them, tell them why you're scared. And what I mean by that is what a lot of these calls sound like, and I've heard a lot of them that have ended in tragedy. I have. And I go back and review how the law enforcement responded. Was there anything we can learn? And what a lot of it is parents screaming that they can't find their kid. And I get it. I would be there too. But what you need to remember is the quicker, the clearer you can get the information, the quicker they can get your baby back to you. The quicker they can get your son or daughter or loved one back to you, the better, the clearer, and the easier you can get them the information and tell them why you're scared. There's a difference of me calling and saying, my son with autism is missing, I can't find him, and me saying, my son with autism is missing, I can't find him, he doesn't know how to swim, and he knows all of my neighbors have a pool. That's a totally different way to report it. And it's going to make law enforcement react quickly and start looking into those pools and looking into those things. Tell them where you think they would go, even if you're not sure. You're talking to them on the phone and dispatch goes, okay, we're going to send you an officer and say, look, you know, when we go out, the only places he really goes that we walk to is a park and the school. And then I would say again, he knows a couple of my neighbors have pools and he likes to get in the water, but he doesn't know how to swim. And then get involved and start your own. Your family or extended family, if you're blessed to have one, you guys should have a meeting soon to say, hey, if ever we can't find him, I want to call all of you guys to help me and let's just start organizing it. You don't have to go through a whole drill, but like talk to your family. Hey, can I count on you to do this? Do you have a current picture of Brian? Do you have an information sheet if I need you to have it? Where are those resources? Because the average missing person call in the United States, it takes 16 to 20 minutes for a law enforcement officer to respond to your location. The average person with autism who has passed away tragically because of elopement, they don't know for sure, but the estimate is it is within 10 to 15 minutes of leaving their home that they are drowned, if that's the case, or they are in danger. So those outcomes often happen before the first police officer even responds to your house. And then when they get to your house, they have to gather all that information that you should have on an information sheet that if you did, you just handed them, or even better, if you've already talked to the police, you say, hey, when you call, I can't find him. I gave you guys my information. You guys have a picture of him. He's in your database. Please go find my baby. All of it's already done. Okay. But those are some things to think about. I have a diehard love for window tint. And here is why. Brian, 20 years old, I told you, has severe autism. He's nonverbal. The boy loves to be naked. I don't know if any of your kids are the same way, but my son loves to be naked. His bedroom is in the front of my house. I wish it wasn't, but that's the biggest room and the best room for him. So what I did is I tinted every window, because even with curtains, I don't want somebody to go for a family jog and glance over at my window and see my son, who's 20 years old, butt naked, jumping up and down on his bed. One, it's not appropriate. Two, it may lead to a law enforcement call that I don't want to deal with. So you can buy window tint. You could pay people professionally to do it. It's expensive. Or you could do what I did, and I went to Home Depot, and for $20, I got a roll of window tint, and I put it on the inside of the window. Some of it can go on the outside of the window, depends on what you buy. And I tinted all 4 of his front windows for $80. And it's been on there now. That current roll's been on there for about 3 years. So I have a dying love for window tint, and I would encourage you on your windows that face the street to have that same love. So safety in your home. Project Lifesaver is a program. I don't endorse it. I don't get paid for it. I bring it up because that was one that was around years ago. There's all kinds of different, GPS and different systems, and we'll talk about GPS in a little bit. In your home, though, think about stickers on your house and on your car. We are very good about bragging about our loved ones with autism. We have autism society stickers on our cars. We have magnets on our cars. We have stuff on our houses that says person with autism lives here. And those are great for first responders. My only side coming to you from a cop and a dad is everybody in your community sees your car and they see your house. That includes the people that would want to take advantage of your loved one. You are basically letting the world know, even the 5% of the world that's bad people that would do bad things, you're identifying that part. And I'm not saying don't do that. Be proud. Put your stickers on your car. Be proud. Just understand that when you're doing it, you're letting everybody know. I have a love for temporary tattoos. When Brian was younger, and when we went to Disneyland or we went out, I would at night when he was asleep, I'd put a giant temporary tattoo on his back. And there was a temporary tattoo that I had printed, and it said, I have autism, I am nonverbal, and it's a dad, my phone number, mom, and my wife's phone number. Because I knew when we went to Disneyland, if we got separated and he got upset, the first thing he was going to do is take off all of his clothes. And then that sticker, that temporary tattoo, would be out for everybody to see. Now, I didn't put it on the front where Brian could see it because it doesn't belong there. And he didn't know I did it. And it wasn't a permanent tattoo, it was a temporary tattoo. But that's something that's out there. Putting autism awareness stickers on the laces of their shoes, inside their clothing. Make it on new clothing because a lot of them have, their routines and their specifics about their clothes, but inside their underwear. Right, I have autism, I'm nonverbal. If they have a shirt, undershirt in their jacket, I have autism, I'm nonverbal. Put your phone number. You want to mark it everywhere. You want there to be no doubt if they get separated from you that somebody has the information to contact you. Medical alert jewelry is great if they'll wear it. Video cameras at homes, and again, at home, locks. Think about your chemical storage. If you own firearms, think about your weapon storage. I've been a cop and been around law enforcement forever. My guns are triple locked. They're in a lockbox, in a safe, in a locked closet. Brian has never, ever, ever shown interest in firearms, but I'm not going to take that chance. In your home with your exterior fencing, if you have a backyard or a back patio with a fence, have you ever sat in your backyard and looked and said, what can you see? And then even better, go to the other side outside of your fence and look in and say, what can you see? I did that, and I realized that when Brian jumps on his trampoline, that if you're on the street outside of my house, you can see Brian on the trampoline completely. And that's okay. I don't really like that. But when Brian gets upset and he's on his trampoline, he takes off his clothes. So when he was 8, it would be, oh, look, there's a cute little kid that's naked on a trampoline. When he's 20, it's now there's a grown man that's naked, that's jumping on a trampoline, and there's kids walking on the sidewalk nearby. So look at that exterior fencing from the inside and the outside. Think about your alarms. Pets can, Brian hates dogs. He hates dogs. When he was little, though, we had a dog that once Brian went to sleep, would sleep in Brian's bed. He knew Brian loved my dog, but Brian didn't want to be around my dog. But the dog knew, truly knew Brian had special needs. I believe that. He wasn't a therapy dog, but he knew. And he would sleep on Brian's bed. And when Brian started having seizures, the dog would jump out of the bed. And that was one of the ways we knew something was going on until we started getting those camera alarms. So pets are a good thing. And again, I get into notifying neighbors. So now we get into your community. These are some safety tips and things for your community. Again, you're going to hear the same thing over and over again. Contact those fire department and the police department. Contact those first responders. Signs and stickers. Notifying neighbors. When I talk about canvass the neighborhood, walk through your neighborhood and see what your loved one would see. So for me, early on, Brian now learned how to swim, but he loves water. Okay. He now knows how to swim, and he's not an eloper, so I don't really worry about it. But when he was little, we walked around the neighborhood because I wanted to see whose backyard pool Brian could see. Because if he did get away from me and he could get access to a pool, he would go jump in it, even though he couldn't swim. So canvass the neighborhood. Look through, where do you think in your neighborhood they would go? If there's a little playground in the neighborhood and you know that they like it, and there's tubes that are, you know, the tube slides that they can go and hide and get away from everybody. Look at those things. Think about routine pass, and then know the predators in your neighborhood. You know, there's Megan's Law, which it's about 70% updated, but it's better than anything. And I would look into those things. And I would tell you to look into those things. We like it when people are friendly, but I will tell you, when the average stranger is friendly, ask yourself, why are they being friendly? Now, with me and my wife, when we go out in the community and I see another special needs family, I'll go up and, hi. You know, I coach a Challenger Little League division. I have 80 kids that play on my team. I know a lot of kids, but I'll see people at the store, kids with autism, and I'll wave and I'll say, your son's cute. And then people kind of look at me, and then they'll see Brian, and you know, as families, we kind of get it. But if I walked up to you and didn't tell you why, and I said, hey, I think your son's cute, that should ring a bell for you. Why is this guy saying this to me? Why is he saying hi? Not that you don't appreciate it, but why? You know, hey, you said hi. If he goes up and says hi, oh, do you have a son with autism or a family member? No, but I'm a special ed teacher. Okay, it makes sense. Oh, you said hi. Oh, do you have a kid with autism? No, but my little brother had autism when I was growing up, so I grew up. Okay, cool. So then you start to understand why people are doing what they're doing. This last part is walk your community with your loved one and in the eyes of your loved one. I learned this 15 years ago when Brian was about 5. And I went to a conference for communication with people with developmental disabilities. And I was talking to an expert who's a doctor who deals with people with autism. 15 years ago, he was dealing with how people communicate. And I remember telling him, and I went to dinner with him at this conference, and I was talking to him, and I said, you know, my son just doesn't talk. And he goes, that doesn't mean he doesn't have anything to say. And I remember going, what? And he goes, here's my point, Brian. He goes, when you go home with your wife one night when you're there, he goes, this is what I want you to do. I want you to let Brian take you guys for a walk. And I had talked earlier about Brian loves to go for walks in the neighborhood. And he said, let Brian show you where he wants to go. Let him take you and your wife on a walk and see where he goes. And you tell me if he doesn't understand what's going on and tries to communicate. And the reason he was telling me is he knows why I was there and that I'm a cop and that I do safety stuff. And we did it. So one night we said, all right, Brian, we get to the end of our driveway and go, all right, Brian, let's go for a walk. Go. And Brian looks at me and my wife like, you're going to take me? We're going hand by hand. No, Brian, walk. We're going to walk behind you. And we walked behind him and we went down the street to the left, to the right. Then he walked through somebody's front yard and I wanted to stop him, but I was kind of like, well, where are we going with this? And he went to the gate to their backyard. And when he's looking through the crack in the fence, they had a pool with a waterfall. I didn't know those people. I have never been in their backyard and neither had Brian. The best I could figure is one of the days we drove by, when I did talk to that neighbor, they open up their fence on the summertime because their kids will run in and out from the front yard to the backyard and friends and family come over and go in their pool. Brian saw that and I never even knew it was there. Not only did Brian see it, but Brian knew the path. And when he was given to go anywhere he went, that's exactly where he went. So it taught us some things as well, but let them walk you. Schools. I will tell you straight off, I am not against schools. I love schools. However, schools have never been prepared for the onslaught of special education cases. I get that. And schools, unfortunately, are at a disadvantage because they have 5% of the population in most school districts of special education, but they require the most funding. And I get that. It's not my problem. It's my job to advocate and give my son whatever he needs. It's their problem to figure out how to pay for it. But I'm not against schools, but there are problems with schools. And I'm not ashamed to tell you that. But these are things I want you to know if your loved one goes to a school. Number one is, and you should ask, do you guys have a district or a school de-escalation plan in writing? And I will tell you, if the school district looks at you and says, or the school principal or whoever's in your IP and they go, no, we don't, that's a problem. Because there should be a plan for how they de-escalate students. Do they have a restraint plan? Same thing. If they tell you no, then you say, okay, well, how do we get one? Can I help you guys get one? Because I want to know how you're going to restrain my son and what situations you're allowed to do it. Do those plans, de-escalation and restraint plans, affect bus drivers? What training do aides have? You absolutely have the right to ask that question. Now, I'll be honest with you. Most aides don't have a ton of training. And my hat goes off to aides because most of them are moms or people in the community that need a job when their kids are in school and they're there. They're great. I love aides. I think aides are fabulous. I wish they got more training. If you ask them, they would tell you they wish they got more training. But you have the right to know what training they have. Are restrooms integrated? Are their boys, do they have just a bathroom for just the special needs kids that they can go into? Is the playground integrated? Are they on the playground with kids in general ed, or are they allowed to? And in some cases for me, I wanted Brian to go with an aide to the playground with the regular kids and play with the regular kids. But I also wanted to know when he was on the playground in the special needs room, they had their own little playground that was protected. When do the police get involved? And do they have SROs? That's a question you have the right to ask. The cafeteria. I don't think I've met a person with autism in 20 years of knowing people with autism that didn't have some sort of dietary issue, whether it's an allergy, an issue, something. I'm going to ask you, how many of you have went to the cafeteria, the actual school cafeteria, and went to the lunch ladies with your son or daughter and said, this is my son, he can't have milk or cheese. And that what will happen when you do that is they'll go, really? Wasn't he here last year? Yeah, I was never told that. And you're going to go, really? But again, you're the parent. So can I talk to the cafeteria people about Brian's foods allergies? And they're going to look at you crazy and ask if you can. And then they should allow you to. And if they do, go and say, I just want you to meet Brian. My son can't have dairy. He can't. He loves cheese. He's going to try to grab it, but he's not allowed to have it. And then I tell them, I said, hey, if he does have cheese, he's not supposed to have it. I'm not going to get mad at you because he still has it sometimes when I try not to give it to him. But can you please let me know he had cheese that day? So that way I understand when he comes home, when he's upset, why he's upset. But have a plan for what to do when those things happen. But have you talked to the actual cafeteria? Police involvement in schools. Again, do they have an SRO? What is their policy? If they do have an SRO, that's somebody else you want to meet with. So your local police department, your local fire department, and your SROs are the 3 people for homework I want you to meet with. What is the policy of the police department in the schools? What steps are taken prior to the law enforcement getting involved? And when is it okay for them to move right into law enforcement activity? Injury reports and emergency kits. I've always said with schools, these were my rules for Brian's classroom that they all knew by the first day of school. Rule number 1 is if my son gets a Band-Aid, gets cut or scratched, I would like to know about it. Number 2 is if he wets his clothes or his clothes get wet or he needs to change, I not only want to know about it, but I would like to have his wet clothes brought back to me or his damaged clothes brought back to me so I can feel better about why he had to change his underwear. And it was just something I did for me as a cop that made me feel okay, but I openly communicated that with his classroom. And they knew why, and I wasn't accusing them of anything, but it helped me feel better about it, and it kept us on that even playing field. And they, most of the time, they will then use that same process for every kid in the classroom, and it just helps parents feel more secure. Emergency kits at school. If your class, if you have a loved one that goes to school with special needs and they don't ask for an emergency kit, you create one and send it with them. And what I mean by that is a picture of their family, something that soothes them, their favorite thing, whether it's, dinosaurs, Hot Wheels, whatever it is, something that they have that will make them feel better, a snack that they're allowed to eat. Put it in a Ziploc bag, put their name on it and say, hey, you guys didn't do this, but I'm giving this to you in case you ever need it. Here's an emergency kit to take care of my kid. Hopefully they get the cue and then ask everybody for one. But sometimes you have to be that good advocate. My areas of concern for schools are these: the restrooms, the playgrounds, cafeteria, transportation, and how does the school respond to quote unquote sexual issues? Meaning, if my son takes off all of his clothes, what do they do about that? Do they notify anybody? Did they tell me? If Brian goes to the bathroom and needs help and they notice a rash, do they notify me, or are they going to go ahead and just automatically notify family services? I want to know, and I want to put on the table that I know there are issues that are going to be difficult, but I want to open up dialogue to talk about them so there are no surprises. Meet and talk to your school resource officers. I can't plug this enough for you. And I teach them to do the same. Documentation for everything. Now, if you ask me right now and you said, hey, Mr. Herritt, can I see Brian's last IEP? I would tell you, yeah, give me a couple hours and let me find it. Because I'm going to be honest, I'm not up to date on my filing that I know right where it is. It's in a drawer with a bunch of other Brian's paperwork. It's secured, but I have to find it. Okay. But you need to come up with a way to keep track of IEPs. Like I said, you get to conservatorship forms, all the stuff you do to keep them safe, all those things you need to keep a track of because you never know when you're going to need them. So documentation is the key to everything. Have a disaster plan. This is the other piece of your homework other than meeting people, is to really sit down with your loved one and whoever you lived with, whoever is close enough to you that would help you in a disaster, and come up with a plan. Explain the roles and the responsibilities. Include your neighbors again. Have photos of them in that disaster plan. Put in your disaster plan a disaster kit with stickers that said no speech, have autism. And I'll be honest, I have one of these right now. Vinny moved out. In Brian's room, there's a little bag with this stuff in it. In Izzy's room, there's a bag for Brian and Izzy in it. And then in me and Linda's room, there's a bag. And then in both of our cars, we have backpacks with even more in it. And people say, Brian, you're like preparing for a zombie apocalypse. And I said, no, have you ever lived with my son? No, then don't tell me what I'm preparing for. Okay. But on the stickers, I put no speech autism. And that is because if we have an earthquake or a major incident, I tell Izzy, stick those stickers all over Brian. I've even taught Brian, if you see these stickers, Brian, put them on your shirt. Because I want anybody he runs into to know he's got nonverbal and he has autism. Food storage. We have food storage in those kits. In my cars, we have a little bit more comfort items for Brian. It's a portable DVD player with DVDs. And I know everybody now is into, Wi-Fi and streaming, but what happens if you can't stream and there's no Wi-Fi? How do you keep your kid happy? So we went out and bought, and they're cheap now. You could buy a portable DVD player for $90 on Amazon. And we bought it with a bunch of batteries. We have a couple DVDs he's never even opened, so I know they work, and I threw them in the bag. And that's simply because if there's no Wi-Fi, no internet, I know I can keep Brian occupied and keep him happy for a while. Comfort items, and then those emergency forms should also be in that disaster plan. So I'm done talking and I'm sweating horribly, and I'm going to come out of sharing my screen and come back out. And then Beth, we're going to do her thing here in a second, and she'll pop back up, and then we'll go from there. So I'm sorry I'm sweaty. I know you guys can probably see me and I'm sweating. I'm going to get a drink.
Take a breath. I know that was a lot of great information. Thank you, Brian. I'm looking through some of the questions. One of the questions is, if you're starting college, should you tell the police department on site that you have autism?
Absolutely. Not only that, you need to talk to the program for disabled students. And I would ask them if they have a program like that. But if you're starting college, you want to let that university or that college police department know who you are. They have the same type of systems. So they can put your name in their system. They can get a photo of you. And if it's a parent that's asking that, and I don't know who asked it, Beth, if it's a parent, I would bring your loved one or the student with mom and dad. I would go to the police department and say, hey, my son has, autism or developmental disabilities and they're starting school here. We just wanted to come meet some of the police officers and see where you're at in case they need any help. And the police officers generally will eat that up and would love that very much.
Okay. Another question is, have you known anyone to use Angel Sense to track an eloper?
I've heard of it. I've never used it myself. And I was going to talk to you guys about that, and I didn't. There are tons of programs for GPS. Okay. I tell parents all the time, you have the right to track your kids, and you should. If they're at a level where they have their own phone, it's easy because you can do it with the phone. Angel Sense is one. You can also go to Radio Shack or Best Buy. There are little GPS trackers, and I'll be honest, they're sold as, spy on your wife or your husband monitors, and you download the app on your phone and you can see where they are. But I've known people to buy those and put them in their backpacks, put them in their jackets, and they work just the same.
Great. Could you please mention the name of the low-cost cameras again?
Mine is YI. It's YI. If you go on Amazon and you look YI camera system, that's what I use. I'm not going to, they work for us. I don't get paid to.
Are you saying like wide, like opposite of thin, wide eye?
No. Y. Young,
Just
Y
the
for
letter
young.
Y.
The letter Y, the letter I.
Okay.
I think it's YI is what we use, but there are tons.
Okay.
I don't know the brand. I saw the question that just popped up, the branded trackers for backpacks. If you go to Best Buy, tell them what you're looking for. Radio Shack was the best place for them, but Radio Shacks are closing down. But if you go to any, electronic store and ask them, and I rather do that than buying online, because then you actually will get a receipt and be able to do what you need to do. So, but I don't know any brands of trackers. Yes, I have heard of Wise is another cheap camera. There's a lot of them out there.
Thank you, Tana.
One of the other trackers could be the Apple AirTags.
Oh,
Yep.
yes.
Yep, absolutely.
They work
Yep.
great.
Use
I
what you
lose a
got.
lot of things, so I use them on devices.
No, yeah, and absolutely. I know with that, I know a story of a kid that rode his bike everywhere, and his parents put one of the tags under the seat. He didn't know it was there, but they were able to track him everywhere he went.
I mean, it's very pinpointed. So
Absolutely.
Works great. Yeah.
Yep.
That's awesome. So Brian, we got 4 different kind of iterations of the same question. And we had an elopement and informed dispatch that we used the reunification program. And the responding officer had no idea what our child, what they were talking about. And so that's one. And then number two, dispatch never relays the information or relayed that information to the officer.
So, and I'm not going to sit here and make excuses for departments, obviously, but this is why I tell you, not only put them in the system, but walk them into the station, provide the form to do all the extra steps. Now, when we talk about the reunification systems, and it depends on where you're at. So San Bernardino County has a system, and Beth knows this as well as I do, because me and Beth were part of this for a long time. And Riverside County has a system. The systems, though, are designed for those agencies that use the sheriff's department for law enforcement services. So like if you live in Riverside County and you live in the city of Marietta, they have access to that system, but the system wasn't designed for the city of Marietta or the city of Menifee. It's designed for the sheriffs. Now, my understanding from them creating these systems is they're supposed to be sharing that information regardless of where you live in the county. So if you don't live in a city in the county that has, say your city has its own police department and it's not the county is supposed to, when you enroll them, share that information with the city. But that's why I told you not only enroll them in a program, but go into your city's police department and say, we live in your city. What do we need to do so you know my address? It's kind of a backup to that. And unfortunately, does it happen where dispatch doesn't relay information? Sure. But that's why I try to give you as many different ways to do it as you can, so nothing falls through the cracks. But unfortunately, sometimes things do.
Here's a question. I don't know the answer. This family, they called CPS on us, but never followed up or contacted us. It's been more than a year. So is that just like?
So what? I'm trying to understand. So a family called CPS on them?
No, somebody, I don't know who, somebody called CPS on a family.
Okay.
But CPS never followed up or
Okay.
contacted the family to say this is closed or whatever, but it's been more than a year.
Okay. So
what
there's several things, and I don't work for CPS. I know CPS, especially in my job now. I deal with them every day. But I will tell you with CPS, there's a couple of different ways they dispo or they end cases. If it's inconclusive, that means that there's no evidence of anything happened. It was just a claim that can't be verified. If it was unsubstantiated, it means that there may or may not have been something, but they can't prove it without a reasonable doubt. And then if it was conclusive or founded, that means that there was abuse that was identified and found. Obviously, inconclusive or unsubstantiated or substantiated isn't the case because you would know. So you're probably looking at an inconclusive case. What I would suggest, honestly, is to call CPS. Call one of the CPS offices and say, hey, there was a claim to open up a year ago. You came out, you talked to us. We haven't heard anything. What's the status? And they'll give you a status update. Sometimes they leave people in that kind of waiting area for 12 to 18 months to see if there's any other referrals, and then they'll automatically close it out. But if you're curious and you want to know, I would call and ask.
Can we talk just for a second, because we'd had a recent call where a person was reaching out for help to CPS, and unknowingly they used the word, I can't control his behavior. I need help. So
Right.
As parents, and you and I had this discussion, we're often taught to be good advocates in the school districts or for regional centers. We need to say things are large, right? That we can't handle it and we need more resources. But when we're talking about CPS or a police officer, right? That saying we don't have control of that situation is a huge trigger.
It is. And I'll be honest, I would say there's two differences to that. I think you have to look at what CPS does. CPS's job is to basically evaluate if kids are being abused or neglected, and if they are, to do an investigation and then remove them from that environment and temporarily place them in a healthy environment. I wouldn't call CPS and ask them for help unless I'm going to report myself for abuse or neglect. That's me personally. My recommendation would be CPS is not somebody that you can call for help with that, because that's not their job is to respond, evaluate situations and say, I need to remove this kid. So although, and Beth will tell you, we're constantly working at the mapping of what do families do when they're in crisis and how do they get help. CPS isn't an agency that's going to provide, their job isn't to provide you with help. Their job is to evaluate, look for neglected and abused kids and replace them. So if you're calling CPS and saying, I have lost control of my kid, I can't control them, you're kind of forcing their hand to say, okay, now it's been disclosed to us that this lady can't take care of her kid. We need to come in now and find a safe place to put them. So, and I don't blame her, because I know there aren't a lot, and that's not something that's put out there for everybody to know. But that's what things like this are for, is I wouldn't call CPS. With law enforcement, I think if you were going to tell law enforcement, I can't keep control of them, I don't know what to do, you have to understand with law enforcement, they don't have, there isn't a magical place to take our loved ones till they cool off that we can give them back again. People know about 5150 in the Welfare Institution Code, where a law enforcement officer has the ability to take a person for up to 72 hours and put them in the care of a psychiatrist so they can hopefully get put on medication. So when they get out, they go on the medication, they take the medication, and they're no longer a danger to themselves, a danger to others, or gravely disabled. The problem with 5150, though, is it wasn't designed for people with developmental disabilities. It was actually designed for people with mental illness who, if they did take medication, they would no longer be violent. Yes, you can take medication with autism and with a developmental disability that may significantly decrease them being aggressive, but it's not going to make their autism go away. So what happens with a lot of 5150 cases with autism is within 2 or 3 hours, they're released right back to the family. So when you call law enforcement and say, here's my son, I don't know what to do, their option is to do a 5150 if they fit the criteria. But a lot of agencies don't want to do it because they know that within 2 hours, they're going to come right back to you again. So that's not the answer. And these are tough questions that aren't mine to answer. This is something that as a community, as a state, as a society, we need to look at what are we doing to provide help for, like Ms. Ross said, the 22 years and older that are having crisis. When your son's 6 and he has a crisis, you put him in his room, you tell him to go to bed, you sit maybe on the floor next to him, even if he has autism, and he does what you want him to do. When they're 25, 30 years old and they don't want to do what you want them to do, that's a whole different scenario. And we in society, law enforcement, psychiatric care, social services, we are not prepared and are not ready for what we're dealing with. We are not. We're behind. So.
Now, thank you for that. And one other note, just because I do see some people from out of the area that don't have access, again, to the special needs registries, just again, go into your local police department and give the parents the words. You want them just to say, I want you to meet my son and I want to be entered into my address entered into the premise. What do you call it? Database?
Yeah, it's the dispatch system or the premise history.
The dispatch system or the database, so that it's not tied to a particular person, but it will be tied to your address. So that is it. If CPS shows up to our house, should do we have to allow them in? Should we call a lawyer?
Do you have to let them in? If you don't let them in, they're going to call the police and they're going to get in anyway. So my advice to you is if you don't have anything to hide, to let them in. I would be open and honest with them. I don't think all cases with CPS need an attorney. I think it kind of depends on how it's going and how you feel it's going. If you feel you need an attorney, then I would say call an attorney. If you don't let them in, what they're going to do is call law enforcement. My fear, if you don't let them in and you don't cooperate, is then you're going to force their hand to say, not only are we worried about your kids' safety, but now you're keeping people from checking on them. We're going to remove your children. And there really isn't a place for them to go. but that would be my fear in you not cooperating. So I would always cooperate, and then if you need to call. But if you don't cooperate, it can make it look more negative about you and put a more of a negative spin on you as a parent, than if you just let them in and let them do what they need to do.
Okay, with that, we are at time. I know we kind of ended it on a heavy note, but lots of really good practical information. So Brian, thank you so much. Donna, thank you so much to you and the Make Waves Foundation, everybody there. This was a lot of important information that we are happy to get out to our families. We're in this together. So anybody else closing comments?
And I'll have Beth, if you can put my email address up in the website to reach out to me.
You can, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I'm happy to, if anyone wants to reach out to Make Waves or myself, share my information as well.
Okay.
We are, thrilled to be a part of this process
Great.
and help
Great.
people.
And that's what I was going to tell you guys that are listening is I do this because it's what I do for my son, and I get compensated for going around and teaching and doing what I do. Beth is a volunteer, and Donna is not only a volunteer but a parent who funded it. So I love it when you tell me thank you, but please, those two ladies, the Autism Society, Make Waves, they deserve the thank yous much more than I do. I do have social media. My website, if you Google Autism Cop, you'll find my email address and you'll find my website. But Beth can put it out there for you guys and give it to you guys. So thank you guys very much. I really appreciate you listening.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you,
Thank
Donna.
you, Brian.
All right.
Thank you, ma'am. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.